The reason we're going to start with Damian Lillard is that Adrian Wojnarowski wrote this big takeout on the Lillard negotiations. And for people who don't know, like Woj does not write these big columns with reporting all that often anymore. So for him to do this is somewhat meaningful in my regard. It's very clear that what's happening here, and he references this in his story, Lillard's agent, Aaron Goodwin, is calling trade partners and warning against trading for his client, basically saying that if they acquire Damian Lillard, Lillard will be unhappy and like you won't get the best out of him. It's clear, though, that the Portland Trailblazers front office, led by Joe Cronin, who has not had to make this substantial of a trade yet in his tenure as the Portland Trailblazers lead basketball operations executive, is struggling to come to a point where he can construct a deal that gets him the offer that he needs and the value that he needs, trading Damian Lillard and getting him to Miami, which is Lillard's destination of choice. It's very clear that there needs to be a 3-team circuit breaker if Lillard is going to get to Miami. Miami offering Tyler Hero, Jaime Jaquez, and Nikola Jovic and like 3 pick swaps and a first rounder is not going to get you home. There's just going to be better offers on the table. So they need to find a way to circuit break this thing and figure it all out. But all of this is playing out in public in such a real substantial way now to where it feels messier than what I think Damian Lillard and everybody wanted it to be. Where do you sit on this, Mark? I'll open the floor now and say, like, this is where it stands, and we're trying to figure out where does Damian Lillard end up? Does he end up in Miami? I think the odds are still pretty likely he does, but it is clear that there's like a real leverage play and like a real behind the scenes war that's kind of happening, I think.
I think I'm less certain that he ends up in Miami, just because, and I really tried to sit with it and get a better feel of how these things tend to go. I know that the Dame situation is a little bit different, but like I think the best representation we have of something similar is like what happened with Paul George when he was in Indiana, and I think everybody was, he really wanted to go to LA. That was all the initial reporting that came out. When it was announced that he was not, I mean, that started during the season, obviously, like, Paul really wants to play in LA. He's from Palmdale. Like, let's get him back there. Obviously ends up there eventually, but I think that's what will be interesting to see. Like, I think that it's very possible that he ends up going somewhere we really don't entirely expect right now, just based because so much of this is coming out of the source reporting from both sides. And, that would be my assumption. And just because, like you were saying too, I feel like the actual mechanics to make a deal happen to Miami right now, unless Portland is willing to take something way smaller or a team comes and chips in to make it a 3-teamer, like I just struggle to see it happening. Because if I'm Portland, like you can't, like, yes, they have a really good base right now, but also you can't really afford to mess this up. You like, especially with what a lot of star trades have netted. When you look at, not just in expiring, when you have a substantial deal left on the table still, like I just, again, like, I don't think that they can afford to mess it up. And I think that's been very clear that they have no intentions of messing it up with how this all has gone. As far as where I think the situation stands, like for me, I do think that I'm just kind of tired of the think pieces about what stars should or shouldn't do or how teams should or shouldn't handle it. And, we don't really need to spend any time on that because I think you're just doing a disservice by continuing to propagate some of that bullshit. But like I think with where I'm at on the entire thing, I'm very curious to see where it gets done, because it feels like, even removing like my own emotional feelings on how trades do or don't work, like I think it feels like this is going to get addressed in the next CBA. Like I know that
we just had one done.
I know we just had one done, but like it feels like okay. So that's yes, but also like that one got pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And I feel like maybe next CBA is the wrong way to put it, but it does feel like within the next 3 or 4 years, we're hitting a pretty big inflection point with how business is done in the NBA. And maybe somebody said that over and over again for the last decade, but this is the first time for me where I felt like, I mean, it does feel like we're hitting, saying an untenable point gives it the wrong connotation. But I do think like it's going to hit that point where ownership and just team governorship and front offices are going to be. I'm just interested to see what happens. I don't know. I don't have a concrete answer. But I don't know.
Here,
yeah.
like I'll take it from there. So like, I think it is more likely than not that he does end up in Miami. All of the reporting outside of Woj is that he'll end up in Miami. And I think it's because very clearly Aaron Goodwin and Damian Lillard's representation is trying to push that. And more often than not, guys end up getting to where they want to go. But there are examples of situations where that does not happen. You mentioned Paul George, going to Oklahoma City from Indiana. You're 100% right. Paul George wanted to go to Los Angeles the first time, and that didn't happen. Donovan Mitchell, did not theoretically end up in Cleveland because of preference, right? Mitchell didn't push it as hard as Damian Lillard is in terms of where he wanted to end up. But everyone pretty clearly reported that he wanted to go to the Knicks. Like if there was a preferred destination, the Knicks were probably it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kawhi Leonard did not say that, I want to end up in Toronto when San Antonio moved him. They just decided to move him for DeMar DeRozan and Jakob Poeltl and picks, right? Like there are a number of these deals where stars don't get to where they want to go. And again, we literally just saw one last year with Donovan Mitchell where that didn't happen. So I think at the end of the day, it is likely he ends up in Miami because that's how these things do tend to go. But I also can't wrap my head around why barring a third team, Portland would do that. We have a question here from NBA Rigged. Like, if it is Miami, what is the percentage chance it involves a third team? I think like 90 plus.
Yeah.
You can't get to a Damian Lillard package if you're Miami.
Well, and hasn't it been reported too, or at least like loosely reported that they're just not very interested in Tyler Hero, Portland, that is. Like
seemingly, yes.
Yeah, and I mean I get that. Like you have Anthony Simons, and I know some might disagree with me on this. I'm higher on Anthony Simons and his potential than I am on Tyler right now. And that's no slight to Tyler. I just think Simons is gonna be that good. But then even then, like, okay, you have Shaedon Sharpe, you have Scoot. It's not like you can't play guards together, but I just think there's some positional redundancy there, and I'd rather getting back something different and having a different package altogether, just getting back more picks, because it doesn't really make a ton of sense for what they're trying to do right now. So that's all to say, like, I'm with you 100%. Like, I think this is almost definitely a 3-teamer if it happens with Miami.
It basically has to be. I think it absolutely has to be a 3-teamer if this gets done. Does it get done? I don't think it gets done for a while. Like, I think we're going to keep talking about this on the podcast for the next little while because it doesn't seem like this is an easy trade. Yeah. It seems like Joe Cronin and the Portland Trail Blazers rightfully are going to dig their heels in. And I think it's smart for them to dig their heels in. It's what I would do if I was running the show in Portland. I think it's really smart, and I think they should try and get as many offers as they can moving forward. Again, do I think it's more likely than not he ends up in Miami? I do. But again, like they don't have the assets to do a Damian Lillard deal, given that they're not willing to include Bam Adebayo, and they shouldn't be willing to include Bam Adebayo.
No.
It's why trades are hard to make in the NBA. It truly is. It is the biggest reason why NBA trades are exceptionally difficult to make. It's not just whether or not you have the assets, it's whether or not you have the assets that fit both your goals and the other team's goals when you're trying to make a deal. And I don't really see these two teams lining up. But if a third team gets involved, like Brooklyn, maybe you could circuit break it with Brooklyn. Maybe you could with San Antonio in some way. There are a number of ways you could theoretically construct this. I just also find it fascinating that this is playing out as publicly as I can really remember a trade request. Like truly, I can't remember a trade request where this thing has been such a public leverage war. It does happen, but to this extent feels aggressive to me.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And I feel like maybe this is setting a precedent for what it's going to continue to be. But at the same point, and maybe maybe agents and players don't care about it, but it does seem like a lot of the goodwill that Dame has been afforded, and I'm not trying to say rightfully or wrongfully the last couple of years, but it does feel like there's been a lot more, maybe I've been too online, but it does feel like there's a lot more pushback and outright resentment to this than I think I would have anticipated, even a year or two ago. And just to speak on that in general, like with Dame, I'm never going to say anybody getting their money is wrong. I think he was right to take the deal and do what he did. I think legitimately, like, I do think that Portland and him were trying to figure this out, but as soon as the scoot happened, like, that just changes everything. Like, I think it's so important to take in the historical context when you look at everything. Like, they tried to do this to a degree, this exact same thing with what happened with Brandon Roy. Like, Brandon Roy gets injured, Dame happens, and like, well, what if we try and thread this? And then injuries keep piling up, things don't work out. Okay, LaMarcus leaves, and they try and retool. And now it's like, okay, we can try and make this happen. We brought Jeremy Grant back. Maybe something else happens. Then Scoot happens, and it's like, okay, well, we're at an impasse here. Like, we don't want to trade Scoot, and I understand that completely from Portland's perspective, because why the hell would you want to trade Scoot? But at the same point, it's like, okay, we haven't rebuilt. Like, this team, granted, it's a new front office. It's not the same people, but as an organization, they really haven't rebuilt in a long time. It's very similar to kind of what the Pacers had to do in pivoting to taking Tyrese Halliburton in some ways. Like, and it's almost to a larger scale with that, in my opinion, because you're trading Dame. Like, it's not the same. But I just think it's so worth noting. Like, I get it from both perspectives. I get that it's difficult, and I think some people are losing sight of that. Like, it's not as cut and dry as it gets made out to be. But yeah, sorry, I know I was going long on that, but that's where I'm at.
No, I don't disagree. And a big part of why this is so hard is that contract situation, right? So any general manager that acquires Damian Lillard essentially has him for 4 years, because I don't really see a circumstance where Damian Lillard is turning down $60 million when he's 36 years old.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't blame Dame for taking that money. He should absolutely take that money. He's entitled to that money. He earned it over a decade in Portland. Also, I think that you probably do have to live with the way that trades are constructed in today's NBA, the potential that you get moved somewhere you might not want to go, and makes it hard. It truly does make it very difficult. And if a team acquires him and gives up the substantial assets that it would require to do so, he's not just going to not play there. Like, that's not who he is. And it's not really something that you can do. So I do think Portland has more leverage here than what, like, people in the media seem to be saying outside of Woj. I also just know the way that these things work, and the best result for everybody is if Miami can rope in a third team that actually values Tyler Hero as an asset and is willing to give up picks and acquire Tyler Hero. It's why Brooklyn, like, you can make a case for Brooklyn making sense, is because they can get off of Ben Simmons. They can see Tyler Hero potentially as an asset and give up, like, real pick value in a deal to Portland. Do I think they would give up enough pick value where it makes sense for Portland to do it? I don't. All of their picks that are valuable are 5 years out, basically. Mm-hmm. So if I'm that Portland front office, I don't want this at the end of the day. Like I truly don't want this. But there are a number of ways that you can try to construct this. There are a number of third teams that you can include. We'll see where it goes, I think. But I'm fascinated by how this is playing out publicly because it is just like a very strange situation across the board.